Hello Comms 363 students. In this presentation we're going to go through a couple of samples of introductory sections or front matter. The front matter is a term we use to say anything that comes before the body begins with the introduction. So that includes the letter of transmittal, the executive summary, the table of contents, the title page, that sort of thing. And in this video we're also going to look a little bit at the introduction again. To see how it differs from the other types of front matter before it. I'm going to give two samples from fall 2015 for these sections, and you see I've blocked out some of their identifying features. One is slightly better than the other, and the other sample is going to be to distinguish it gray background. We're going to start by looking at the better sample. And this is the letter of transmittal, page 1. That's not a numbered page. It's meant to be laying on top of something if it were printed out with a printed version of the report, or else the letter would be a separate attachment from the report itself in an email. Or it could be, some of it could be contained in the body of the email itself, but this is probably an attachment. And you see this information has been gathered from the website, probably the footer or the contact us page or the about us page, and it has a specific name of a person who might be responsible for the website, either the webmaster or the main person in charge of the organization. The subject is very specific to the report that it is transmitting. We also have an address that's specific to a person, but this is a too personal approach. You should be using the Mr. Salutation, Mr. Upshaw, or Dear Director Upshaw. Some other good features about this is that it doesn't assume that the reader knows what our course is, or even has read carefully the address above, and so it identifies who people are, and saying the purpose and what the report really is. It also has some motivating features, saying what makes it a great website and suggesting improvement to make it even better. That part helps to motivate the reader to continue reading the letter and to find some use in the report without it being all about negatives. One thing you should do at this point when you're thinking about your letter of transmittal and your front matter, in fact the entire report, is to refer to the handbook section called Your Group Reports Rhetorical Situation. It starts on page 73 of the Smith Handbook. And that's where, if you read it, you're going to have a better introduction, a better letter of transmittal. So read that section to understand what are the circumstances that you should be imagining yourself writing this. Okay, so this is not about imagining that you're part of a fictional organization, that kind of thing. This is a realistic rhetorical situation. So the other sample, it doesn't use the template, and because of that it's running into some difficulties about even our expectations about what it should be, and it's reversing the recipient and the sender. It's also very generic to the organizations, and it makes it less likely to be read when it's overly generic. It seems a bit like there could be 40 of these instead of just one, unique to one person. So it should be to a person, not to an organization. And everyone wrote a study, so maybe identify something more unique about your study. So that would be helpful. And it does assume too much knowledge about terminology, and it also seems to assume that they know who we are. And so it's not very audience sensitive. It doesn't seem to transact within a rhetorical situation. The usability test is different from a usability study. Usability studies are very general, but a test is usually an experimental test, and we didn't do an experiment, we did a survey. Has a bunch of word choice problems and logic problems at the sentence level, and that's what those lowercase a periods are for. They're showing that there's some logic or argument issues at the word choice level or the sentence level. So here, the audience would not know what these things are, and yet they're bandied about as if the audience knows. So keep this this letter something that you don't need to explain in more detail. Keep your language and your terminology at the level of not needing further explanation. There's also some sentence-to-sentence flow problems, and they've included their email addresses, which you don't need to do, because if you've read the section on the rhetorical situation and if you've actually looked at the template, you would notice this, which means that you're acting under the umbrella of the instructor, and they could just contact me as the instructor at this phase. You haven't finished the course yet. So all you really need is your names, not your email addresses. So let's move on now from the letter of transmittal, and you may have your executive summary before or after your title page, but find out what the template and the instructions say for this year about the order, about what comes first, where to put the executive summary. So there might be some differences between this year and last year. Not going to go through the title page. This is the good example of the executive summary. We're looking for the summary of the introduction, summary of the methods. This is the summary of the findings, which parallels your conclusions section. And this is the summary of the recommendations. So it's in the proper order, and you should also try to avoid passive voice. Instead of saying secondary sources were used, try to say that secondary sources provided guidelines, right? So this has some wording issues, as well as some things become puzzling and are not explained. So brief explanations are okay in an executive summary, but not something that requires a citation, nothing that requires a lengthy explanation. This brings up something that also would require explanation, because this would require internal knowledge of the course's function and is not necessary to understand the contents of the report on the topic of methods. It uses good visual design with bullets. It has some unnecessary repetition of the words "the website," and so the words "the website" could be included here at the end of the introductory phrase rather than at every bullet. And it is good that each has a parallel grammatical opening. We do look for lists to have parallel grammar as they open. So increase, use, arrange, replace, that's all proper for recommendation. And then using evaluative terms: fails, inappropriate, unable, fails. Fails is a bit harsh for your audience, and it would be better to say just does not provide. Looking at the other sample for their executive summary. Here it makes it sound like they don't know who they are. Again, it's not sensitive to audience. This is good though, because it gives the goal, and that should probably be less generic. Every report does that, and it shouldn't say "their," it should use "the website," because the executive summary is a little more objective, but it still shouldn't make them feel, the reader at this website shouldn't feel distanced by a third person pronoun. It does use some key terms that might be a bit puzzling, so try to include some concise definitions, again without citing necessarily. It's good that it covers specific topics of the report. It has a methods paragraph. It has a conclusions or findings section, but it doesn't use bullet list. It's okay if it doesn't, but if you don't use bullet lists, you should also focus on sentence-to-sentence flow. And so sometimes it takes more words to create flow, and it might be easier to do a bullet list. You shouldn't include data, and you don't need to have reasonings about why something is important or essential. They should just be the summary of the actions that were recommended. And watch grammar errors like that often come in with the word its. So that's they've put their title page after, and again, follow instructions about the order. Even their title page has a confusing subheading. As you can see, it makes it sound like the society is the object rather than the website. The only thing here is that it's in the main title, but not how can you have the usability of a society? Okay, sorry about that. Back to the good report. Let's move on to its table of contents. Here we notice it's nice because it's using the template, it's using the instructions to embed a Microsoft Word automatic table. You can see all the numbers are nicely aligned because it's automatic. These things, list of figures and tables at the top, should be omitted from the table of contents because they're part of a table of contents, just the second and third part. And also this should be omitted because that part we assume is not going to go to your organization. It's only going to the instructor. The list of figures and tables are well done. We have each of them starting with number 1, table 1, or figure 1. These things like citations should be removed, and any detailed notes should be manually removed after you have updated these sections of your table of contents. It's okay sometimes to include a question number as long as it doesn't lengthen the actual description longer than it should be. We don't want to have complete paragraphs in this list or multiple notes. Take those out manually. If we look at their table of contents, we see irregularities in font and the pagination. Sorry, there we go. And we also find spacing irregularity. The appendices are not A and B as they should be as well. The author credits don't belong here. Figures and tables. This seems to misunderstand that tables are a separate thing, and if you do combine them, you need to have them not all be figures here. There's some tables, and the colons are not APA. You see there's irregular margins going on because I don't believe they're using the template, or they're not using an embedded Microsoft Word embedded list like they should be. Okay, so using the template can really help you to make it look right. Let's go to the good sample of the intro first. And this is the last thing we're going to look at in this video is the intro. The intro should be written as if a person has not received the letter of transmittal and the executive summary has been misplaced and separated from the document. So this person should be reading the intro and understanding, why is this report written? What is this report about? What are its subtopics or its focuses? And it does need to justify the study. Why is it important for this organization? And be very specific to this website and to yourselves, and your relationship to the organization is not as overt as it was in the letter, but it does acknowledge who you are for the reader who doesn't know. It's good that they're using the word your, which is fine, but right here what it's doing is making the sentence start with the organization rather than the website. So, you know, this is a report on the website, and later on you can say, we hope that your organization will benefit. And this is good, your website. So it's fine to use those pronouns throughout. It's audience sensitive, and use it whenever it's appropriate. And this is what we're also looking for, is citation of the website as a whole using APA like this. and introducing any acronym that you might be using throughout your website, or throughout your report, sorry. General terms like rhetoric and usability can be explained and defined with or without citations of sources. And you know, you could acknowledge some of these limitations, but that might be better in a letter of transmittal. It might also be something that you say is a limitation of the methods in the methods section. Here it should be the strengths of the study and why it's useful for this particular organization and this particular audience. I've bolded this. It wasn't bolded in the original, and the students have included sentences like this or long phrases that don't actually highlight what the concept terms are. And so it would be helpful to highlight the concept terms in this list. It's good that it's parallel. We have because and because. These are justifications, and the justifications are a good strategy to use in the intro to justify the study as a whole. A better way to justify it would be not generic users, but to say something about these particular users of this site and their you know, specific approach to this content. So try to make these things specific as possible, to customized to this website and this report. It's good that they say what a usability study is, but of course they haven't explained what usability itself is. Working on sentence-to-sentence transition flow, that's also an issue throughout most of people's reports. When you see yes, that's what it means. It means yes or good. So if you get some of those either in the margin or in text, that's a nice thing. And what it's doing here is that it's limiting the scope of the report. It covers these things in the bullet list, but what it doesn't do is this. And that's nice to know so people don't have incorrect expectations. But it's optional to do that. And it's interesting and good. As you can see, here's what they have used their context information for when they did their report A. They learned about the context and the purpose of the organization. And instead of teaching them what their organization should already know, this part here becomes the less important part of the phrase or the sentence. And the most important part is that they're making a claim that this research is sensitive to this specific website. So your claim should be something you're informing them that they don't know, but you can base it on information that you share with them. What we don't include anymore in 2016 is this type of paragraph at the end of an intro. Do not preview the sections. First of all, because we have a table of contents, but also because our major headings are very generic. Most people in the professional world will know that a research report has a methods section, what a findings section is, what a conclusion section does, and all of this was totally unnecessary because it's so generic. So we've omitted that from this year's reports, and we hope that you do not require that or do not include that because it wastes words. This introduction doesn't include the citation in passing. It's good that it says who they are, but it's using some problems with explanation missing and some wording problems, and as well as not using dashes properly. All kinds of little things crop up that distract us when we read and distract us from your main ideas. And what we have here is a citation from one of my pages, and it doesn't give my page number. It's quoting even my citation, which had an error in it, but this is not the way that you quote a source within a source, because this student did not go to Nielsen, they only went to Smith. And so if you are quoting a source within a source, go to your APA part of the handbook and actually look for the section that talks about how to cite a source used or quoted within another source. Also, this isn't even 40 words. If you do the word count, in Microsoft Word, it'll get much less than 40. So it doesn't require its own paragraph. It should be run in. So there's even formatting issues going on to distract us from what you're saying. And it is good that they're talking about objectives and aims of this particular research. It's actually showing some key terms that they cover, but it doesn't justify. It just says, yep, that's what we did. The end. It doesn't say why it's good or important for this website or this organization. And then again, it has this preview paragraph, which we don't include. So in this presentation, I've covered that introduction plus the front matter, and I hope that helps you to do well on your final report. Talk to you later.